I know you're tired of how slow this is. You've been doing the work for months, maybe years, and when you look at how far you've come, it feels like nothing. It feels like you should be so much further along by now. Like all this effort should have produced more visible change. Like other people seem to move through their growth and healing so much faster than you're moving through yours. And every day that passes without dramatic shift, without clear progress, without some obvious sign that you're getting somewhere, it chips away at your motivation. It makes you question whether any of this is working. Whether you're doing it right. Whether you're capable of the kind of transformation you see other people achieving. You look back at where you were 6 months ago and you can barely see the difference. You look at where you are now and it feels almost identical to where you were then. Same struggles. Same patterns. Same stuck places. And you think, what have I been doing all this time? Where did all that effort go? Why does progress feel so impossibly slow? I'm not going to tell you that you're making more progress than you think. I'm not going to point out small changes you're not seeing. Because maybe you are making progress and maybe you're not, but that's not actually what's making this feel so slow. What's making this feel so slow is that you're measuring progress by the wrong metric entirely. You're measuring progress by external change. By visible shifts. By how different your life looks now compared to before. And by that metric, yes, progress feels glacial. Because external change is the last thing that happens, not the first. External change is the downstream effect of internal shifts that take much longer than anyone wants them to. But you're not being told that. You're being sold a story about transformation that's fundamentally dishonest. A story that says if you do the work, change happens quickly. That breakthroughs are sudden and dramatic. That healing is a linear process where you can track your progress and see yourself moving steadily forward. And that story is a lie. Or at least, it's so incomplete that it might as well be a lie. Because real change, lasting change, sustainable change, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't happen in dramatic leaps. It doesn't produce visible results on a schedule. It doesn't move at the pace your conscious mind wants it to move. Real change happens in layers. And each layer takes time. Time to recognize. Time to understand. Time to feel. Time to integrate. Time to stabilize. And only after all of that, only after the internal work is complete, does the external start to shift. But you're living in the internal layers right now. In the slow, invisible work that doesn't produce anything you can point to and say, see, I'm different now. You're in the part where your nervous system is reorganizing itself. Where old patterns are being dismantled at a level so deep you can't consciously observe it. Where new ways of being are being built cell by cell, synapse by synapse, in a process that takes months or years, not days or weeks. And because you can't see that work happening, because there's no progress bar for nervous system recalibration, because internal shifts don't announce themselves with fanfare, you think nothing is happening. You think you're moving too slowly. You think everyone else is progressing faster because you can see their external results and you assume their internal process must have been faster too. But it wasn't. They went through the same slow, invisible layers you're going through now. They spent months or years in the place where nothing seemed to be changing. They questioned whether it was working. They wondered if they were doing it wrong. They felt like progress was impossibly slow. They just don't talk about that part. They talk about the breakthrough. The moment when everything finally clicked. The external changes that validated all the invisible internal work. But they don't talk about the years of slow, grinding, invisible effort that preceded that moment. Because that part doesn't make a good story. That part is boring and frustrating and makes people feel hopeless rather than inspired. So you don't hear about it. And you think your slow progress is unique to you. That you're the only one for whom this is taking so long. That everyone else has access to some faster path that you're somehow missing. But there is no faster path. There's just the path. And the path is slow. Excruciatingly slow. Slower than you want it to be. Slower than seems fair or reasonable or bearable. And the reason the path is slow is because you're not just changing your thoughts or your behaviors. You're changing your nervous system. You're rewiring neural pathways that have been running the same way for decades. You're teaching your body that it's safe to be different than it's always been. You're integrating new ways of responding to the world into a system that has deeply grooved patterns for how it responds. And none of that happens quickly. It can't happen quickly. Because your nervous system doesn't trust quick change. Quick change feels dangerous to a system that's designed to keep you safe through consistency and predictability. So it resists. It tests. It takes its time integrating anything new to make sure it's actually safe, actually sustainable, actually something it can trust. That's why you can have a breakthrough insight and then find yourself back in the same pattern the next day. It's why you can feel like you've finally shifted something and then watch yourself do the exact same thing you thought you'd moved past. It's not because the insight wasn't real. It's not because you didn't actually shift. It's because insights and shifts happen at the conscious level, and your nervous system needs time to integrate them at the unconscious level where your actual patterns live. And that integration is what takes so long. That's why progress feels so slow. Because the conscious work, the insight and understanding and decision to change, that part is relatively fast. But the unconscious integration, the part where your body actually rewires itself to operate differently, that part takes months or years. And during that time, while the integration is happening, it looks like nothing is changing. You have the same reactions. You fall into the same patterns. You feel like you're not making progress. But you are. The integration is happening. It's just happening at a level you can't see, at a pace you can't control, in a way that doesn't produce external evidence until it's nearly complete. So you're not moving slowly. You're moving at the pace nervous system change actually moves. Which is slow. Much slower than conscious change. Much slower than you want it to be. And there's nothing you can do to speed it up. You can't force your nervous system to integrate faster. You can't think your way into accelerating the process. You can't try harder or do more work or be more committed and make it go quicker. You can only do the work at the conscious level and then wait for your nervous system to do its work at the unconscious level. And that waiting, that slow invisible integration period, that's what you're in right now. That's why progress feels so slow. Because it is slow. Not because you're doing it wrong. Not because you're deficient. Not because you're moving slower than you should be. But because this is the actual pace of nervous system change. And anyone who tells you it should be faster is either lying or doesn't understand how human systems actually work. And I know this doesn't make it feel better. I know you still wish it was faster. I know you're still tired of being in this slow place where nothing seems to change no matter how much effort you put in. But maybe understanding why it's slow helps a little. Maybe knowing that the slowness isn't a sign of failure helps you stop judging yourself for still being here. Maybe recognizing that everyone else's progress was just as slow in the invisible stages helps you stop comparing yourself to their external results. Because what you're comparing is your internal process to their external outcome. You're comparing your slow, invisible nervous system integration to their finished product. And that comparison will always make you feel like you're failing. Because you're comparing two completely different things. You're in the middle of the process. They're showing you the end result. And the middle is always slower, messier, less impressive than the end. That's just how processes work. But the middle is also where all the real work happens. The end result is just the visible manifestation of what happened in the slow, grinding middle. The part where nothing seemed to be changing but everything actually was changing, just too slowly and too invisibly for you to see it while it was happening. So you're not moving too slowly. You're moving at exactly the pace you need to move for the change to be real, to be sustainable, to be integrated all the way down into your nervous system instead of just existing at the surface level of conscious understanding. And yes, that pace is frustratingly slow. Yes, it requires patience you don't have. Yes, it asks you to keep showing up and doing the work even when you can't see any evidence that the work is producing results. But that's what real change requires. Not dramatic breakthroughs. Not sudden transformations. Just slow, patient, consistent effort while your nervous system does its invisible work of rewiring itself. And the hardest part is that you don't get to know when that invisible work will be complete. You don't get a timeline. You don't get milestones. You don't get progress reports. You just have to keep doing the conscious work and trust that your nervous system is doing its part, even though you can't see it, even though it's taking longer than you want it to, even though you have no idea when you'll start seeing external evidence of internal change. That uncertainty is brutal. That not knowing when this will pay off, when you'll finally see progress, when the external will start to match the internal, that's maybe the hardest part of all. Because you can endure slow progress if you know when it will end. But slow progress with no end point in sight? That feels impossible. But you're doing it anyway. You're enduring it. You're showing up and doing the work even though you can't see the results. Even though it feels like nothing is happening. Even though everyone else seems to be moving faster. And that persistence, that willingness to keep going when there's no immediate payoff, that's actually what creates the conditions for the nervous system integration to complete. Because your nervous system is watching. It's observing that you're showing up consistently even when there's no reward. And that consistency is what creates safety. That's what signals to your nervous system that this new way of being is trustworthy, sustainable, worth integrating fully. If you only showed up when you could see progress, your nervous system would know this is temporary. It wouldn't integrate the change because it would know you'll abandon it once it gets hard. But you're not abandoning it. You're here. Still showing up. Still doing the work. Even when it's slow. Even when you can't see results. And that's building something in you that's deeper than any quick fix could build. You're building a foundation that will actually hold. You're creating change that will last because it's happening at the level of your nervous system, not just your conscious mind. But it's slow. God, It's slow. And I wish I could tell you it will speed up. I wish I could give you a timeline or a shortcut or some way to make this go faster. But I can't. Because this is the pace. This is how long nervous system change takes. This is the reality of deep, sustainable transformation. It's slow. It's invisible for a long time. It requires patience and persistence and faith that something is happening even when you can't see it. And you're doing that. Right now. Even though it's hard. Even though it feels like too much. Even though you're tired of how slow this is. You're doing it. And that matters. That's everything, actually. Because slow progress is still progress. Invisible work is still work. And the fact that you can't see the results yet doesn't mean the results aren't coming. They are. They're building. Slowly. At the pace nervous system change actually happens. And one day, not because you forced it but because the integration finally completed, you'll notice something has shifted. You'll respond differently to something that used to trigger the old pattern. You'll feel different in a situation that used to feel the same. You'll look around and realize that something fundamental has changed, and you won't even be able to pinpoint when it happened because it happened so slowly, so gradually, that there was no single moment of transformation. Just slow, invisible integration that eventually accumulated into visible change. That's coming. Even though you can't see it yet. Even though it's taking longer than you want. It's coming. Because you're doing the work. And the work works, even when it works slowly. So keep going. Even though progress feels impossibly slow. Even though you can't see results. Even though everyone else seems to be moving faster. Keep going. Because slow is the pace. And you're moving at exactly the right speed for change that will actually last. Not fast change. Real change. And real change is slow. Frustratingly, exhaustingly, unbearably slow. But slow and real is better than fast and shallow. So let it be slow. Let yourself move at the pace your nervous system needs to move. Let the invisible work happen without needing to see evidence of it. Just keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Keep trusting that something is happening even when nothing appears to be happening. Because it is. Slowly. Invisibly. But absolutely. You're changing. At exactly the pace you need to change. And that pace is slow. And that's okay. That has to be okay. Because that's the only pace there is.